Hello everybody, it's Max with Crypto Talk now. When it comes to Quant, there's so many different innovative things that they keep coming out with, literally daily. And if anything, one of the key things I want to outline for you all is how Quant is solving things on scale like nobody else is doing. Whether it's having a more attractive circulating supply compared to Bitcoin, more attractive max and total supply compared to Bitcoin. And if anything, like I mentioned many times, it's basically Bitcoin, but with utility. In the future, it won't even deserve the title of having Bitcoin even associated with its name. Now, of course, this is not me necessarily bashing the likes of Bitcoin. Let's face it, Bitcoin's a pioneer for crypto, and it deserves basically a lot of credit. But my key thing I want to share with everybody here today is just that when it comes to Quant, think about how the internet went from the different stages of where it was and where it is today. We're in what is referred to as WEB3. What does that entail? Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into today's Quant coverage. As you can see right here, I'm about to play this particular clip for you guys. And of course, shout out to no other than Quant Papa for doing a great job of providing these particular clips. And listen to the message at the beginning of this video, and of course we'll have an outline for you on how all this gets broken down and makes sense. About 2 minutes and 6 seconds, and I'll come right back.
People who just talk about blockchain are talking about something very interesting, but it's a piece of enterprise technology that's an advanced database. And a private blockchain unconnected to the global, to the Bitcoin or another digital currency blockchain is the equivalent of the intranet. Remember we had intranets to begin with, where it was really cool. You could do internal communication with people in your own companies, but it wasn't really until those intranets were connected via the internet protocol to other intranets to create the World Wide Web of intranets called the internet, that the world changed. The world is going to change in finance when we connect the private blockchains via the Bitcoin or Ethereum or other protocol to the other blockchains in the world. Have a global blockchain that's the World Wide Web of blockchains that will fundamentally change the way in which not only do we move value around the world at the speed of light, but also in which we actually fundamentally change the way in which we compute, because it's the fourth computing paradigm I've experienced in my lifetime, the decentralized computing paradigm. That is the vision of where we can really go with this. That's transformational. Now, the first step will be the intranets, the blockchains, as those get deployed. But that's not the end point. That's just a first step.
Where we're heading now is we're at the Internet of Trust. And this is a distributed ledger network, which is the evolution of the Internet. And this is what we're in the middle of building. I mean, our technology is shaping the next evolution and generation of the Internet. And that's what's really exciting for us. And in terms of the vision, what we're doing is replacing the centralized web. And if you think about it, it's becoming obsolete. The value that was created with the centralized web is around the application layer. The protocol was quite small and not that much focused on, but now it's the other way around.
Like he says, now is the other way around. One of the key things I definitely wanted to bring to you guys in that regard. Back to, for instance, the whole statement of, trust. Now, let's face it, there's a lot of issues when it comes to just that, trust. Here's something I wanted to show you guys before we, of course, get in more in regards to the topic of trust. Now, in that earlier clip, you heard, for instance, the gentleman in the middle of that particular interview mentioning a few key things, right? And how that's basically, to a sense, where we're at today. How these things come together and are connected. Like, for instance, he mentioned the whole topic of intranets and how, that all started. If you were the type of person you were back I don't know, let's say you use the internet back in the early 90s, especially, right? If anything, you're familiar with the likes of news groups and how that basically happened. And then went from that to IRC, and that's, of course, a whole other story in itself. But the concept made a lot of sense. And it still makes a lot of sense when you look at it from a bigger perspective of what's going on today. You always hear these, expressions, Web3. Think about what Web3 entails. And for me personally, when it comes to the likes of Quant, I'm looking at what they solve. Now, on a previous video, we have outlined, for instance, Quant's Overledger technology, right? Overledger is Quant's operating system. And that in itself is not a blockchain. So here's a perfect example that you see right here. And if anything, I want to draw, of course, your attention to this. And that is how you literally see, for instance, how it sits above everything else, right? So on the bottom, it's going to go ahead and zoom in here. You see your public permissionless blockchains, right? Bitcoin, Stellar, EOS, IOTA, Ethereum, so on and so forth, right? In the middle area, for instance, you have enterprise permissioned blockchains, right? Big difference between permissionless and permission. You have, for instance, the Hyperledger, you have Corda, you have, for instance, Ripple there as well. Again, Ethereum, JP Morgan's Quorum. And of course, at the top here, you have existing networks, right? Platform, enterprise systems, and of course, your applications and so on. But if anything, think about how Quant basically makes all that interoperable and so on. And again, like the example made before, think of how huge of a moment that was to go from the early days of, let's face it, Internet 1.0 or Web 1, and then getting to the point where we entered, of course, into Web 2. Again, a lot of people don't realize how big of a jump just to have the likes of JavaScript, for instance. Without JavaScript, you don't have these things you're even viewing me on, right? YouTube, things like that. For instance, if you follow Charles Hoskinson, he basically outlined a few of those key things. But my key takeaway is this. I want to be invested into, of course, the cryptos that make all this interoperable and connect everything at a scale that nobody else is doing. And of course, again, Quant's Overledger makes that stand out big time, right? Countless different examples. And then on top of that, their partnerships and so on, right? So I know I could get more and more into this, and of course I have, but of course I just wanted to bring some emphasis and have people understand from a broader perspective how this all basically works. It's very, very exciting because you see literally before your eyes the evolution of Web3. It's not just building Web3. Quant basically accomplishes Web3 from a perspective that has never been done before, right? It's literally the evolution of Web3 before our eyes. All right, a little bit more in regards to some of our coverage. Again, back to this whole topic of a crisis of trust. Now, again, I realize this is a while back, but it still pounds at home even that much more for what's going on basically with this whole FTX thing and so on. This is about 2 minutes, and of course, we'll kick it back here for some more comments about just that in just a moment.
So I think right now we have a crisis of trust. The system that we're all using, the financial system, it's built on a legacy architecture and a legacy infrastructure that was actually designed in the 70s. And so we're building everything on a rocky foundation, and we're having the issues that we've had today. So if you look at what's happening with data breaches, threats that are constant, we see it every day, and we've kind of become decentralized. So right now we're in the middle of a revolution where we can actually re-architect this foundation for the first time. Finance and financial services has not had this opportunity since the 70s when we moved from paper finance to digital and electronic. Now we're moving into a trusted, using blockchain, a trusted financial architecture. So what blockchain does is allows you to trust the network, because you can trust that the system is telling you it is X and that's true, and no one else can tamper with it. So it's allowing us to trust one another again, because before that, we couldn't. You know, the crisis of trust meant we've given up our data, we've put it into all these companies' servers, data centers, and there's a breach, and you lose it. But now we can actually control the data and we can control the trust.
But Gilbert, hold on. So are you actually saying, though, I mean, we think about breaches, obviously, in financial services, what happened with Equifax and other industries such as Facebook. You know, are you actually saying that blockchain won't suffer from those kind of breaches? You know, how can I trust it when I just look at the headlines in the news and it scares me?
The true story is nothing is 100% secure. I mean, the only secure the system is when it's off and not connected to anything in the world. So blockchain gives us better security, as Jules was saying, because you can trust the cryptography, you can trust the maths. How you implement blockchain is the same as any other technology. Is it a database or a mobile device? You have to implement it with security controls and the right controls around your implementation. So it does help us regain trust, but we have to do it correctly.
Regaining trust and doing it correctly. How true it was then when he stated that at this particular conference, WCIT 2019, of course. How, you know, even that much more truthful that is even right now, especially right now. All right, a little bit more in regards to our quant coverage. This particular statement, we are the now generation. I'm going to, of course, play this again, and we're getting more comments about it. I'll elaborate a little bit more on this. There's a few key examples you're going to hear that immediately speaks to the likes of, for instance, what they're accomplishing with Quant. Heck, you can even throw in Stellar Lumens, Ripple's XRP, and so on. Again, this is about 1 minute and 20 seconds, and of course, we'll be right back.
We're a now generation. We want to watch and consume things now, whereas previously you had to wait for things to come to you. And so the consumer trends have changed, but the problem is banking hasn't adopted, and they're starting to, but they're hindered by legacy, they're hindered by regulation. And I could give you an example. HSBC in London, we spent £6 billion a year just to keep the system on. So there's a heavy legacy, a technical debt that we're all carrying, and it's very difficult for banks to try and innovate quickly, because if you touch something, it might break, and sometimes no one knows what's happening within the environment. But then you see challenger banks, especially in Europe and in the UK, we have a lot of new mobile-only banks that have started from scratch. So they're not carrying any technical debt. They can actually do things quicker and faster. And the good news is the regulators have recognized the potential, and they've opened up regulation. They're allowing fintech to innovate. And we're seeing, you know, new challenger banks taking on the bigger banks, and they're getting more and more customers because the experience is a whole lot better. It's mobile. You never need to go to a branch. You can get what you want now from a mobile phone bank as opposed to a traditional bank, and that's happening.
Yeah.
I think this. Yeah.
So, of course, at the end of that was a very cool moment. But one of the key takeaways that I want to share with you guys is this. Think about what he mentioned, right? So, for instance, you have some of those challenger banks, right? Challenging the status norm, right? So, for instance, you know, traditional banks, the whole issue of going down to your local branch and so on, trying to accomplish basic things that already happen from a mobile perspective, doesn't necessarily seem like that big of a deal. It is a big deal. Here are some particular examples I'm going to give you. So, for instance, I don't know if you guys ever seen the video, for instance, where it was Ashton Kutcher. He's a guest, for instance, on Ellen. Of course, I could have showed you guys this particular one, but I'll just state this one. You can look it up yourself. Anyway, he goes on Ellen. He makes a donation to Ellen's cause, one of her, you know, charities and so on. It's for $4 million. Now, again, this was a while back before the whole thing with the SEC, with the likes of Ripple and so on. But if anything, what should have had some emphasis was how fast he was able to send $4 million, like within seconds, to the likes of Ellen DeGeneres, right? Now, that's just one of many examples. And of course, some of the examples he mentions is, you know, like it says here, you know, we are the now generation. But having that mobile banking, Like for, let's face it, a lot of us use that, right? We don't even think much about like, a lot of times I don't even mention, or I don't even go to my local branch. If I don't need to go to my local branch, I'm not going to do that. But my point is, think about this. How he mentioned that this challenges the likes of the status quo, like, let's face it, some of the central banks and so on, to keep up with the innovation that's out there. I'm thinking of literally what's going on as we speak with this whole thing with ISO 222 and that particular standard and so on. You know how much pressure that put on those particular banks. Whether banks were for the whole ISO standard or not, they recognizes that there's going to be some benefits to it because, let's face it, the likes of, for instance, CBDCs are going to be coming. And if anything, if they're going to have to get on to this new system, why not recognize the technologies of these particular ones that solve some real world use cases? Hence, what's going on in the financial sector. Hence, what Quant is doing on a scale like nobody else has basically done, right? The meetup basically, it's not quite a meetup, but let's face it, the whole thing that happened with Cybos, right? So for instance, you literally had, their chief product officer, was it Martin Hargreaves, for instance? He verified. We basically talked to Swift, right? This is not just rumors. These are, it's basically the Quant team verifying that. You also have, for instance, Gilbert Veridian, who verified that as well. And then, of course, then you saw the code. Again, if you haven't seen it, check out the previous video that we released. Shows the code of, for instance, on the address of Quant. And then at the end of that particular address, gateway line, you have Swift. Again, you can draw your own conclusion, but if anything, you are able to make just that, the connection, no pun intended. Now, again, that statement, we are the now generation, how the challenger banks, puts that much pressure on these traditional banks. Now the traditional banks realize they have to be innovative to keep up with the times, because if they don't, just like anything else, your competition will swallow you up. And if anything, what did we see this last weekend, right? Especially on Saturday the 19th, how many different banks basically upgraded their systems and had downtime. Again, the start of the flip of the switch is happening. All right, a little bit more. Again, back to the code, right? So it says 3 lines of code. That's all it takes to connect your enterprise to blockchain. Over Ledger makes it possible. Here's the statement I'm still going to pound home all the time, all right? And that is, you do not see Bitcoin doing this. Yes, Bitcoin is the number one cryptocurrency out there based off of market cap and so on, right? And on top of that, of course, price per coin, you name it, right? And they're always going to be a big contributor, of course, to, historically speaking, a pioneer for crypto. But they're not innovative. Look into the Satoshi white paper. There's no smart contracts. None of that, right? So when I look into, the likes of Quant, I literally say, I'm going to keep saying it again and again, it is the Bitcoin, but with utility. And again, eventually, it won't even deserve that title. Quant will have its own name itself. It already does, to a sense, but you get the connection I'm trying to make. So 3 lines of code, that's all it takes to connect your enterprise to blockchain. Overledger makes it possible. Look at this. So for instance, here's some of the code. You see some of it already, hence the likes of Bitcoin, Ethereum. Heck, how about that? Ripple's XRP, right? Pretty impressive to see that. And of course, when you see this right here, SDK, software developer kit, so on from Overledger. And it's really simple. It's very attractive to the likes of other devs that are thinking about coming over to something like this. Again, it does cost money, and of course, it's an investment in itself for even devs because they're purchasing a license. Why would they be purchasing a license? For the same reason Microsoft, Windows operating systems, right? The server OS version of that. Even from the consumer point of view, if we have Microsoft, for instance, Microsoft Windows 10, right? The home version or the pro version, you name it, Ultimate. There's all sorts of different licenses. A little bit more in regards to our particular coverage. There's this right here, EBSI, with the, of course, the EU and so on. Listen to how this is basically broken down. And if anything, we'll come back, of course, for some more commentary. I want you guys to have a broader perspective, if anything, about Quant and what they're doing. It's not just me coming on here mentioning, hey, it's Bitcoin with utility and that's it. No, I want to back it up with, of course, multiple clips to give you guys more of a perspective. And of course, a lot of times it's a lot nicer to have some actual video commentary straight from the head honcho, if you will, Gilbert Verdian, the CEO of Quant. So again, it's about 1 minute, and then we'll come right back.
So we're setting EU policy on blockchain and what that means. And so one of the things I'm doing as personally is I'm going to Brussels in a few weeks to set the EU's blockchain strategy up. So having worked in government, I've delivered government services to citizens. And so what the EU wants is a cross EU blockchain ecosystem where anyone can connect using any type of technology, existing or blockchain, to deliver government services. And a very good example is identity and citizens, having passports, having that
KYC.
transferability. Yeah, KYC and health records. If you're in, let's just say you're in Brussels and all your health records are within Brussels and you want to go over to France and just get a checkup there, your health record can travel with you across blockchains, and that's what the EU wants to set up. So I'm working on that as well. So we're setting EU.
That's massive in itself. Think of how many times we mentioned here, for instance, how we achieve some of these large market caps, right? For somebody just coming into a quant video like this and so on, I get where you're coming from. It's like, I never heard of some of these crazy price predictions for the likes of Quant, XRP, some of these other ISOs and so on. It just sounds nuts. It seems nuts. But if anything, they're not taking into account, the true value of connecting all this. Again, like we mentioned, you put so much emphasis, at least I do, from the financial sector, and rightfully so, because that's, in my opinion, that's multi-trillions, if not a quadrillions, when you really, really break down the bigger picture of the scope of where this can go. But I'll try to come down and be a little bit more realistic and conservative. I'll say in the trillions when it comes to the likes of Quant and so on. But again, that's just from the financial sector point of view, right? Think about what Gilbert Verdian literally just mentioned when it comes to healthcare. That is a multi-trillion-dollar industry in itself, right? Not just for the likes of Europe, especially over here in the United States, right? And of course, that's a whole other rabbit hole to go down. We'll probably do, in another video and so on in the future. I'm sure of it. But think about it. The different industries that Quant is able to accomplish this whole concept of interoperability. And that example that he used right there was huge. Because if anything, it's not just putting the focus on, it has to be blockchain, right? He mentioned specifically there's other ones, for instance, in which it doesn't necessarily have to be blockchain. That's powerful in itself because it takes the limitations out of the equation. All right, a little bit more in regards to our quant coverage for you here tonight. A little bit back on the whole subject of EBSI and, of course, the EU and so on. So there's a few things I want to outline for you guys. And, like, for instance, it says early adopters program, imagining what EBSI can do for, of course, European citizens. Back again, of course, to the topic of what Gilbert was just mentioning previously. So it says it's an incubator to help early adopters and their partners imagine, build, and launch their EBSI pilot projects. And of course, you see a breakdown of how this all works. This is, of course, a while back and so on. But my point is, again, you saw kind of like a roadmap in its own portion or sector, if you will. And Quant has already accomplished all this. You know what I mean? And if anything, I know a lot of times you guys want to see some of the things that, well, what about for the future and so on. Again, we still need to refer back to some of the things that they already accomplished and whatnot. And then, of course, who do you see right here? Bottom right, Gilbert Verdian. Of course, that panel discussion was back on October 2nd, 2018. But think about the scalability, keyword interoperability, right? That's literally the slogan for the likes of Quant, and sustainability, the state of art. And then, of course, shows some of these people that attended this particular discussion, right? Jesus Rios, of course, CTO of Elastria and so on, who does a lot of these interviews with the likes of Gilbert and whatnot. And of course, Gilbert, right, CEO of Quant and so on. And then this highlight efforts like Overledger, which currently connects 6 different blockchains. By the way, a lot more, right? We're now in 2022. Support interoperability and user choice. Elastria, the Spanish national blockchain, started with Quorum because it was the only production-ready choice available last year, but is now evaluating other blockchains suitable to its public permission approach. A little bit more in regards to this, in this particular statement, right, from Gilbert. We are here to connect the BSN, EBSI, UK, and other jurisdictions to the rest of the world through the Overledger network. Powerful, powerful stuff. On top of that, you saw, for instance, what happened a while back last September. Oh, I forgot. September was a couple months ago. So let's face it, September of 2021. Upon completion, EBSI aspires to be a facilitating up to 15 billion transactions per minute, a world first for blockchain technology. That was huge in itself. Then the Quant connection. All right, a little bit more in regards to this. So, for instance, you see this. It says the rise of regional DLNs. But while national DLNs have huge potential, regional multinational DLNs have even more. This is because they deliver even more value than national infrastructures by providing the ability to deal with jurisdictional issues and support cross-border trade. In fact, the benefits of regional DLNs are so significant that some are already live or in advanced state development. In the EU, for example, EBSI DLN is coming online. And of course, that already happened, while China's BSN infrastructure was basically rolling out. And then, of course, you see some of this further down. This is probably, however, the most advanced example of a regional DLN is currently LAC chain. We've talked many times here at CTN about the whole thing that Quant accomplished, of course, with the likes of LAC chain. Even way before, this whole thing went live with, or is going to be live with ISO 222. What they accomplished beforehand, before everybody else, basically, with the likes of Latin America, was huge, and it still is, because it gave everybody a taste of what Quant can accomplish with cross-border payment technology with the likes of Quant and this, for instance, the Overledger, right? So, for instance, you see a little bit more of this. Of course, Quant is mentioned. So it says an alliance led by the Inter-American Development Bank operating across, like I mentioned before, Latin American and Caribbean region. LAC chain is already having demonstrable positive social impact, and the consortium has developed a roadmap which, of course, supported by just that, Quant's technology, which ultimately led to the interconnection of regional DLT systems. Now, in closing, something else I want to show you that right here. I understand that there's a lot of fear, and rightfully so. Of course, I'm going to flip it back. A lot of people, they go to CMC, they see this. We went below the $800 billion, global crypto market cap, and it seems like it's doom and gloom. I will remind people this. Go back and watch some of our previous videos where we outline some of these 4-year cycles. What happened basically with Bitcoin and so on. I get it. You see this when it comes to Bitcoin, it's now into the 15s. Let's face it, this could crash all the way down to 11K, like Richard Hart basically predicted and so on. He's been right about all that. Ethereum looks like it's probably going to drop below 1,000. And there's a lot of doom and gloom, and people feel as though that this whole crypto winter thing is going to be extended for another year or two and so on. I will state this again, focus on the 4-year waves, these 4-year cycles, especially with the likes of Bitcoin and so on. It gives you a broader perspective of what is going on. And if anything, my thing is, like the expression from Warren Buffett, yeah, I get that he's a very anti-crypto person, but, as the saying goes, where there is, be fearful when be fearful when people are greedy, and be greedy when those are fearful, basically, excuse me. That's the way I look at it. And if anything, I am looking at these particular situations because, again, if you look at how, historically speaking, all this has gone, these are the times in which things do take a turn for the other direction and so on. I'm not just stating that just to state it and so on. Again, we've done a multiple day series where we cover these particular cycles and so on. I would highly recommend you checking it out. And especially, we talked about this, of course, on our live show, by the way, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific daily here at CTN. But if anything, again, I want to show you guys this before we close or wrap things up, I should say. So you see Quant at roughly 105. Let's face it, it could drop below 100. It basically did last week, right? We saw it go into about what was it? I think it was like 94.50. So on. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened again. And if anything, that I'm fine with that because I'm not into Quant for swing trades. I'm into Quant for some of these long-term holdings because I see where Quant is basically going. Again, I feel as though it's truly the Bitcoin, but with utility, and that is what is so appealing for why I'm into Quant and why I like to make some of these particular videos. As you see, the volume's up about 50%. I think people are definitely taking advantage of these particular times and so on at these prices. I firmly believe that we'll be eventually priced out of Quant. And again, guys, look at the circulating supply. Compare that to the likes of Bitcoin sitting at 12 million, max total supply about 14,612,000. And again, if you're wondering, if you're new to all this and you want to know how to do this, pretty simple. Just go back to where it says Bitcoin, for instance. You see the circulating supply of Bitcoin at 19,213,000. That's a way bigger circulating supply. And of course, their max supply is 21 million, total supply 19,213,000. So guys, that we will conclude our coverage here at CTN on the likes of Quant. Like, comment, subscribe if you haven't done so already. And it's just that, guys. Thanks again for watching. May you all have a blessed day, and we'll see you on the next one.